All right, welcome. You've made it to the Watch Me First video for the Freescale hit project number 1, MonkeyJam. So every project will have what's called a Watch Me First. It's the equivalent of a Read Me First text file, just to kind of tell you a little bit about the project and bring it to your attention all the stuff that you might miss. Whenever you're first looking through the project page. So obviously you made it to the first set of videos into the Watch Me First if you're here. So I'm going to step through the community page and kind of tell you about all the little pieces and parts. Now, the community page we're looking at is a pre-release version. I have a chicken and egg problem. Until I get it published, I've got to get everything done and then make the Watch Me First. But this is just about the version we're going to go with before release. So you have just about everything, on the page. So, first we're going to look at the project summary. The MonkeyJam is a DIY stomp box, and it's a educational teaching tool to get people interested in signal processing and real-time signal processing. So almost everyone kind of understands music, and a lot of people listening to this or watching this may have played an instrument or played guitar and may want to take part. And this is a cool interactive project to get you used to signal processing concepts. So what you're going to end up with is a fully functional guitar processing system. Now, you don't have to just do it on musical instruments. You could plug in whatever you want into the Freedom Jam board that kind of comes, that you build with the project. Now, I originally designed it for guitar, but there is an 1/8" stereo jack that you can use that, and there's also a headphone output. If you got really tricky, you could figure out how to use the USB port on the K20D50 that we're going to use. But to start here, the example code is for a neat little stomp box. So when you're all done, some of the skills you'll have developed, or at least investigated, is real-time processing, some DSP algorithms. A big one, fixed point mathematics. This might be your first introduction to fixed point. In terms of hardware interfacing, we have a 24-bit I2S data converter that you're going to kind of see how that's done. You're going to be able to have to solder some SOIC and 1206 devices, and this is an important part which we're going to talk about. And we're going to play with the DSP library. So that's what you're going to get out of this. And keep in mind, this is a teaching tool. The whole idea here is education in signal processing. And at the end of the day, you might have something that's really, really neat. So the idea was to get you something that gave you a hardware and software framework that you can kind of build your own stuff with. Now, in terms of materials, we have a Freedom K20D50. At the time of this video, this was the only Freedom board that had a Cortex M4 core based processor. So let's click on the K20D50. So this is an inexpensive board. It's slightly more expensive than the KL25Z. It's approximately $16 or $17. But you're getting a little bit better processor, and it actually includes the headers for the Arduino compatible interface. So that's actually a nice little touch. It has a lot of the same other stuff as the other Freedom boards, but the big deal is that it has a Cortex M4 based processor. Now, I'm going to point out to you here that the processor in here is not the latest and greatest. It is not actually the best, but it is certainly good enough for you to get started making some fairly high quality effects. I kind of picked this one out because of the M4 core. It has just enough flash and just enough RAM to do some interesting things. You will be able to do, like, for example, overdrive effects, certainly some neat filtering and EQ, and there is enough RAM for enough delay length to get you, like, say, a pitch shifting effect or a chorus or a flange. Effect. You don't have enough memory for, say, a very long timescale reverb or very long delay effects, but you do have enough RAM to implement quite a bit of stuff, and you're going to hear it turns out pretty nice. So yeah, so if you're not familiar with the K20D50, certainly go through the page. Very, very similar to the other Freedom boards, except that this one has a processor with the M4 core. So let me go back here. Now the M4, the big difference between that and say like the M0 is that it's all in the instruction set. So the M4 instruction set, has some large multiply and accumulate instructions for automating digital filters. Now the next component is the Freedom Jam. So this is a custom shield for the K20D50 that has everything you need to kind of interface your guitar. So you kind of look at the picture. There are some potentiometers, in the design, and I have these nice knobs, some 1/4-inch jacks, 1/8-inch jack, stereo jack for headphone output. But everything you need is here. Now, in a separate video, we're going to kind of dive into this complete hardware design package, but I just want to show you that it's here. As of today, everything is up on the Freescale community site under Freedom Jam. Basically, what you get is you get the complete design package, everything you would need to build it yourself. And as with all of the projects, the goal here is to kind of build up your confidence in building some more complex electronics. So at some point, we may have like a Kickstarter to get a bunch built and have them pre-built, but part of the fun of electronics is building it. So think of these projects as something a little bit more difficult than your first starter projects where you just buy a board and play with it, because you're actually going to be learning some surface mount soldering. Now, it's not as hard as you think. We went out of our way to choose parts that were fairly big for in surface mount terms. But what you're going to see is once you have it built that it's not as bad as you think, and in some ways you almost never want to go back. But everything's on this page, so you're kind of made aware. And as of today, the design is at Rev Gamma. I use Greek numbers. Alpha and Beta were pre-production prototypes. Rev Gamma, you get the complete design package, bill of materials, and also Gerber files for ordering at Osh Park. At OSH Park. So there'll be more information to that in the getting started video for the Freedom Jam. Now, the other thing you're going to need is for code, we need CodeWare 10.5 as of this video. I believe 10.6 just came out. I have not time to test it, but 10.6 should work, but get 10.5 if you're not sure. You need the special edition software. That's the freebie that gives you, I believe, 128 or 256K of code. That's a development tool. At some point, it's not today, but at some point, if you're not familiar with Mbed, Mbed is an online development system, originally started for an NXP-based device, but Freescale is also a partner. So today, you see they have all these different parts. They actually support the KL25Z. That is a non-DSP-based core. The K20D50 is in the works. It will be released. And when that comes out, I'm a little bit involved helping with that. Everything will be ported so it will work with the Mbed online environment. And the advantage there, it's a little bit quick and easier and quicker to get started with the online tools, as you don't have to install tools, but you lose the debugger. Now, there is another board, brand new, hot off the assembly line, the Freedom K64F. This is an M4 core as well, but it's so new that when I went through the design cycle, I did not have time to, I didn't have access to the information. But at some point, we may port this over to the K64F because he has a lot more RAM and a lot more processing horsepower. But for now, the K20D50 is certainly good enough, and it's less expensive. Lastly, you need the code to make it all work, and so all of the code for all of these projects will be stored on GitHub. So if you're not familiar with GitHub, you should be. You should be familiar with, if not GitHub, a source control, a version control system. So GitHub is just a site. They have both free for open source and also paid for product, paid for services for hosting Git. So Git is a version control system. kind of came out of the Linux development world, but it's very popular in the open source world. So even if you don't know how to use Git, I gave a link to get the releases of software. These are just snapshots of the software. So you can see, you can just go ahead and download, and there is a whole video dedicated just to getting the software and building it and kind of walking you through. If you want, and I'd recommend, is get your own GitHub account. It's a good way to kind of get into the ecosystem and start playing around. So that's where the software is at. Let me go back here. Ooh, I went too far. Oh, one other note I should make about GitHub. Right now, we are at release R0, so periodically I release these snapshots, from what's called the master branch. And the master branch is just kind of used for mainline development. There may be future releases in future as we kind of work on it. Maybe people submit code, but right now R0 is kind of the reference code. So it's always there. It's going to work. But like I said, as bug fixes or things come out, there may be additional releases, and there'll be documentation to kind of step you through it. Now, so before you get started, you're obviously found this video, so you saw a prerequisite video. So what we have here is a set of videos, and there's almost 4 hours of video material here to learn all about real-time signal processing. So here we have the YouTube playlist. I have already set up of all these videos. So some of these dive deep into the theory, but highly recommend you go through this to learn. Like I said, you see there's 4 hours here. It's a lot. So, but once you go through this, you should have a good grip on real-time signal processing. Now, if you've had a signal processing course in college, this is still very useful because this is high enough level where you get all this stuff you probably didn't learn in class. In class, you learn about theory about Z transforms, things of that nature, but you might have done everything in MATLAB, or you might not have had a nice piece of hardware. So this is definitely a nice tie-in. Vice versa, if you learn it this way, this is a neat way to get you started that you may want to take a signal processing course. So I tried to approach it in a very easy manner. So there's everything here from real-time signal processing kind of for dummies, where we look at how we do tone controls and nonlinear effects. We look a large series on fixed point mathematics of how we do computations with integers. We look at a specific fixed point format. I go over the hardware, I go over the software, and there's a little bit about guitar physics, so you can kind of understand, what's required to sample a guitar. So there's the videos. Certainly prerequisites for you to listen to. Plenty of material. We wanted lots of material. So other than that, you got to get a Freedom Jam, you got to put it together. As of today, you've got to build it yourself. Don't be afraid of it. Come to this page, post notes. If you have problems, get a hold of me. I'm Eli Hughes, ELIHUGHES. You can find me if you search on the internet, you'll definitely find me, or you can post a message here. Leave a comment on the page. At some point, if you're interested in a Kickstarter, let me know. I'm targeting possibly by 2014 Maker Faire of kind of showing this off at the Maker Faire. And see how much interest there is, and maybe getting a bunch of boards pre-assembled. But there's so much to be learned from doing it yourself. And if you're a new engineer out of school, don't ever be under the assumption that you're not a technician. You really need to be, and you need to learn how to put things together, because it makes you a much better engineer. There's plenty of videos, and I have a link here to spark fun. There's so much in surface mount soldering. For a couple $100, you can get all of the tools you need. People spend more than that on their weekend beer and chicken wing money. So for a semester. So definitely invest in some decent tools. And there's so much out there on surface mount soldering that there's no reason to be afraid of it. Once you put it together, you got to make the Freedom Jam to the K20, download the code, and then I say hack and slash. Go for it and play with it. There is a video on configuring the software that will, software overview, show you how you download and how you play with the software. Lastly, which is almost just as important, are sound samples. So what I did is I tried to have a somewhat scientific setup for sound samples. So there's two primary sound structures, processing structures in the release R0. One called patch overdrive and one called to be clean. So overdrive, your signal goes through what's called an IR biquad filter. For tone control, it goes through a hard overdrive, simulating a hard overdrive of, say, a tube amplifier. Another IR biquad, somewhat simulating a speaker, speaker, and then we go signal out. And I kind of list out what are the ranges on the potentiometers. The other patch is called to be clean. Very similar, where it comes into a little bit different set of tone controls. The overdrive it goes through is much softer, and to be honest, it almost doesn't even clip. It's right on the edge, so it gives you a nice, good compressed tube sound in another speaker simulator with a little bit different parameters. So you kind of get a clean and a dirty sound. And so all of these presets here, and I do a lot with to be clean because you can really hear the difference. I tried to do some very simple strumming and picking so you can really hear with just some simple processing structures you can get a wide variety of tones, and you might even be surprised, for example, this neck pickup, what kind of things you can get out of the neck pickup. Now the overdrive, I have two primary sound demos. One, a drop D kind of twiddling around, and it's a fairly actually high, I call it, it's fairly high gain because you can hear a little bit of hiss in the background. It's fairly high gain. I typically like a little more high end to my overdrive to really cut through, but you kind of get an idea what you can sound like. Then I have an overdrive done with a neck pickup, and I kind of have like a B minor thing I twiddle around with, like a Stevie Ray Vaughan-ish. Not that I'm anywhere, I'll never be as good as him at guitar, but it's that kind of style. So all of these sound samples are in the attachments at the bottom. So you can go here, download these, and kind of listen. I also mentioned that the setup is pretty simple. It's my Carbon Ultra V plugged directly into the MonkeyJam board. The output was went into a little recorder, a Zoom recorder. I literally took the files, uploaded them. Other than I converted them from stereo to mono because I was just on the left channel. No processing was done other than a couple I had to boost the volume because I didn't have the volume record level set quite right on the Handycam. But there was absolutely zero post-processing of these signals. This is what, as recorded, came out of the MonkeyJam. So I think you'll be fairly impressed for a project you can put together of what you're going to get. Now, one last thing. I should have told you this. This is almost last thing was the sound samples. I have a utility here called Biquad Filter View. So all of the filter structures in the MonkeyJam are what are called biquads. So what this allows you to do is it's a Windows program that allows you to play with all the different biquad types that's kind of built into the MonkeyJam to get an idea of how you set up the filters. So let me bring it up. So here's the program. And what it does is it uses this really neat audio EQ cookbook for music DSP. This is the same cookbook I use in the MonkeyJam software. What it allows you to do is pick all of the different types of filters. So for example, I'll go to peaking EQ. I like that one. You kind of pick the parameters. Now, all of the biquads have some common parameters. Some sort of center frequency, Q, a dB gain or loss. And what it does, it calculates in real time the filter coefficients, just so you can see them. But what the whole idea of this tool is, you don't need to worry about these coefficients. That's done in the firmware. Is figure out what kind of ranges you want these tone controls to go between. So you pick things that make sense. So I put on the plot some references of where the low E, high E, and the high E24 string is at. And what you're going to notice that the guitar is very narrow band. When you talk about 100 hertz to 1.3 kilohertz, most of what we call, whenever musicians talk about the meat or they talk about the rich sound of the guitar. It's all like from like 100 hertz up to like 400 to 600 hertz. It's all right in here. Everything at like a kilohertz and above, that starts to get like, if you have too much of that, it gets really bright and brittle. But when we talk about that tone of the guitar, the electric guitar, you're going to see it's all right. It's very low. It's a lot lower than I bet you would ever think. So let's just see what this does. So if I start playing, you know, with a peaking EQ, I'll put this at 100 hertz, you know, and let's go with a dB gain. Yep, there we go. And so you notice I get in the grain of the magnitude, I get a bump up of 9 dB, you know, at 120 hertz. So you can see as I play with the Q of the filter, we can play with the Q, we can go and move it. So you're going to notice that even a filter like this you put in front of your guitar, it's pretty cool the different stuff you can do. So we can do bandpass filters, you know, high pass, low pass. The shelf filters are kind of neat because even though it's like a shelving filter, this transition region here and this phase shift can give you some really interesting results. So, you know, by playing with the Q, you can do some really neat, you know, really neat kind of stuff. Oh yeah, look at all that. So you don't need much in terms of processing horsepower because really with a guitar, you don't have to do much to really affect what's in there in the middle to get some good tones. Now, the other thing I want to point out here is, let me close that. This, once again, is on GitHub, and there's instructions, you know, on how to download the software and everything you need. Is that I really want you to think about is that companies like Line 6 and whatnot have made effects boxes and digital effects for a while, really trying to model, you know, the stuff that's already out there, the old amplifiers from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Think of this as a tool that you could certainly spend a lot of time with something like this, getting every nuance of like a Marshall Plexi, but that's already been done. You can go to buy Line 6's stuff. Think about, could you make something that doesn't exist? What doesn't exist? Can you get a new tone that no one else has? When everyone else is buying Line 6's gear or PV's gear, tuning in like all the same old stuff, you can get in there and get something that's maybe brand new, a new tone. Because I love the older amps, I love the models, but you know what? It's done. They figured it out. There's nothing more to be done. So now let's think about what can we do new. And the MonkeyJam, it gives you a start. Like I said, it's not the biggest, baddest, fastest processor, but there's enough to get some really good results. So that's the Watch Me First video. Certainly go through all the other videos, and I hope you enjoy the project.